can't someone else babysit? What about Grandpa, or the food dog? That old guy who feeds the pigeons!
I'm sure Grandpa, Food Dog, and Esteban already have plans for the night. Besides, they aren't the ones who made a promise to babysit their little sister.
But this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity!
You're right. An opportunity to live up to your responsibilities and be a good role model to your little sister.
As humans, we have a tendency to shift the blame of a negative outcome to someone else, but strive to reap the rewards of a positive outcome regardless of our involvement in the matter. Most of us only like to be responsible for the good things that happen to us, but not the bad and the ugly ones. What we need to realize though is that to truly be happy and fulfilled in life, we need to take on responsibility for everything that happens around us. We need to embrace the responsibilities that life throws at us and get stronger with it. A teaching that Jake Long, the American Dragon, had to learn as well. It's a teaching that helped turn him from a silly, unreliable teenager into a strong and responsible man. Because American Dragon is a TV show that can teach all of us something very important regardless of age.
This is your territory, young dragon, and you alone are responsible for the magical creatures living within it.
American Dragon first aired around the same time as some of the most iconic Disney cartoons like Phineas and Ferb, Kim Possible, and the Proud Family. So it's no wonder really that this show has become a classic of its own, and if you've never watched it, there are only 2 seasons and it's really worth a watch. Set in New York City, this animated series follows the story of Jake Long, a 13-year-old teenager who has his plate filled with responsibilities, and as most of us had to realize firsthand, our teenage years are not the easiest ones to handle. Our hormones start messing with us, our bodies start to change, and on top of everything, most of our parents decided to go through a midlife crisis at the worst possible moment. And even though human teenage years are hard to handle, imagine having to go through all of this whilst also being a dragon. And not just any dragon either, by the way, but the first American dragon. And as the first American dragon, Jake Long is tasked with protecting an entire magical realm filled with unicorns, fairies, leprechauns, and more. An entire subworld that is in constant need of protection from monsters to ghosts to the Hunts clan. Jake Long is obviously completely overwhelmed with the amount of responsibilities that are thrown at him. The amount of things that he has to tackle at the same time is incredible. He needs to be a good older brother for his sister Haley, he has to help his grandpa take care of the family business, he needs to protect all magical beings in his vicinity, find enough time to complete dragon training on a daily basis, make some room for his friends as well, and on top of everything else, he also needs to bring in good grades as well. It's a lot for a 13-year-old to handle, especially when you start finding out what responsibility really means. When you are responsible for any task and it turns out bad, that outcome is your fault, and this is a pressure that most people would rather shove away to someone else. But Jake Long is not any regular kid, and with time he starts to realize that he can learn from all the mistakes he made and become more responsible, day by day, bit by bit, because he is the American Dragon.
Hey, when was the last time either of you were the American Dragon? Well, as the little troll girl currently filling the position, let me tell you, it's stinking hard! He may be the American Dragon, but he's also a 14-year-old kid who just wanted a couple days off.
As a confused and hormone-ridden teenager, Jake Long is obviously not the best at taking on responsibilities. He is, after all, a free-spirited individual who sometimes just wants to be left alone and do his own thing. But he can't. The weight of being responsible for thousands of lives on a daily basis is not easy to bear. He is very often overwhelmed and can barely find the time to just be a kid for once. He blames all his circumstances for how hard life is and can't stand all of this pressure, but it's understandable why. Life can be very overwhelming and hard to tackle as it is, but if you're also forced to live a secret magical double life, things are bound to get out of hand. Which is why it's no wonder that Jake often ends up endangering himself or someone else he was responsible for, only because he refused to take on the responsibility that was handed to him. But I don't really blame him. Jake is after all just a typical teenager. He wants to have fun and forget about all the responsibilities that come with life's adventure. He wants to eat the cake without having to bake it in the first place, but he quickly gets to the realization that life doesn't work this way. Life is not just a compilation of sugar-coated events. Life is a balance of giving and taking, as it says in the Bible. But let every man prove his own work, and then shall he have rejoicing in himself alone, and not in another. For every man shall bear his own burden. Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption, but he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. And let us not be weary in well-doing. For in due season we shall reap, if we faint not. As we have therefore the opportunity, let us do good unto all men. And women, of course. Jake Long starts to realize that if he wants to eat the cake without taking on the responsibility of actually baking it, he will never learn how to bake a cake, only how to eat one. He will for eternity be bound to having someone else bake the cake for him, and this is a weakness. If you can't even bake your own cake, don't expect life to just hand one to you.
Not we. You.
Me? As in alone? Solo?
I will not be around forever. It's time you put your dragon training to the test.
Results require work, and work requires responsibility. And Jake starts realizing this lesson, realizing that the responsibilities that he is handed, though they are many and incredibly overwhelming, they are not a curse but a blessing. These responsibilities give him the opportunity to learn from them, and they open him up to taking on more and more in the future. They get him to a point where he becomes a leader, someone who embraces responsibility with open arms and a big smile. Responsibilities that shape him into the man that he becomes and turn him into something even more incredible than a dragon. They turn him into a responsible adult, a leader, someone you know you can count on if the situation is dangerous, someone who will stand up for the people around him and help them out when needed, someone who is worthy of the title American Dragon.
Come on, Gramps.
Many battles lie ahead. We pick training up tomorrow, right after school.
I'll be there, Grandpa. Right on time. I'm sorry I doubted you.
Throughout life, I have met a plethora of people who love to blame others for their mistakes but can't wait to reap the rewards of someone else's merit. People who love to shift the blame to someone else if things are not looking good, and to some extent, I used to be like that myself. But there was one book that changed my view of the matter completely, and a book I've mentioned before on this channel. Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. I'll leave a link in the description for anyone who's interested in it. This book perfectly reiterates the teaching that Jake Long has to learn for himself, and a teaching that most of us should adapt for our own lives. The teaching goes as follows. Implementing extreme ownership requires checking your ego and operating with a high degree of humility. Admitting mistakes, taking ownership, and developing a plan to overcome challenges are integral to any successful team. Leaders must own everything in their world. There is no one else to blame. Both in American Dragon's case and in real life, most things that happen to us are inevitably going to be our own fault, but that fact is not a critique, but rather an opportunity. Every time something bad happens to you or around you, fault yourself. Don't try and shift the responsibility onto someone else, but take it on and embrace it, because if you declare the outcome to have been your fault, you have now given yourself the power and the authority to do something about it and change the outcome for the better. But if you simply claim that you had nothing to do with the situation, you are giving away that responsibility. A responsibility that could have taught you something new, a responsibility that could have let you change the outcome in your own view. Embrace the responsibilities that come with life and learn from them, and then, once you have achieved that, take on more and more responsibilities of your own free will. Situations that would logically speaking not even make sense for you to be the one responsible for, but you took them on regardless. Because you knew that if you want to make the world a better place, you need to go out there and do it yourself, and not demand someone else to do it for you. It doesn't matter if you're demanding it from a government, a boss, or a parent. The only outcome that will truly satisfy your vision needs to come from yourself. If you need any motivation to inspire you, don't look any further than Jake Long, or maybe even a real-world equivalent, Daryl Davis. I just want to quickly tackle this one last point. When I said that whatever happens to you or around you should be your responsibility to fix, regardless of whether or not it was actually your fault, I meant this radically. Daryl Davis is the best example of this. He's an African-American R&B and blues musician who throughout his entire life never really understood the Klan's hatred towards black people. He used to say, "Why do you hate me if you know nothing about me?" It was a puzzling question to him and to most people, to be honest. But where most people would see this as someone else's problem to deal with, or that the Klan members are just evil people and that we should disregard them as such, Daryl Davis took it upon himself to answer that question, and once he found out that most of them were just completely brainwashed from their youth on, he took it upon himself to de-radicalize them. But he didn't do so by going out on the streets yelling for someone else to make a difference, or by boycotting major media corporations into bending the knee and banning these individuals, but by seeing it as his responsibility to fix the problem, by going to these Klan members and talking to them and showing them that he was just as human as everyone else. And with time, Daryl Davis was able to befriend over 20 KKK members and was responsible for over 200 members leaving the Klan. He took on the responsibility of changing these people's minds, even though it was not his fault that they were the way they were. And then he was able to make some good friends because of it. Daryl Davis, just like the American Dragon, knew that to be fulfilled in life, you have to take on all responsibilities that life throws at you, and that being responsible for a negative outcome is not a curse, but an opportunity for you to change the outcome. An opportunity for you to become a better person, an opportunity for you to become more like the American Dragon. Take the responsibility, not the glory. Be the leader of your own story. Thanks a lot, guys! Feel free to check out one of my previous videos right here. This channel is all about looking at video games and pop culture from a different perspective, about digging deeper into the meaning of life and how we can get there with video games, movies, and TV shows. So if that interests you, maybe subscribe? Maybe hit the bell to be notified? What about that, Yeah? Okay, good. See ya!
funky rhythms!
I thought it had more of a freeform jazz vibe.